what's the plan? In the next few minutes, I will tell you a little bit about what my education was, how I arrived basically in my current position, and I'll give you some thoughts on what is relevant, what retrospectively, what might I have done different, what is relevant for me when you sort of think about your career or just your professional path throughout life. So as Tamara already said, I'm currently have the position of ethics officer, and I will also tell you what that actually is. So what did I study? I studied actually in Vienna at the TU Wien, technical chemistry. So that was the first part of my studies, which is like a bachelor studies nowadays. And then the second part, the master's studies, was back then called biochemistry, biotechnology, and gene technology. So that's where I sort of branched off towards life sciences, and my research was actually very life sciencey. During my studies, I was 1 year in the US, and then when I came back, I was actually, that was at the end of my studies, I stayed in Austria for my PhD. I stayed at the TU Wien, but it was part of a large EU consortium project, so there were a lot of international collaborations and traveling to countries within Europe, which was actually very nice. And during that time, I was already co-teaching lab courses and helping out with some students. After that, I again left Austria for a while. So I was a postdoc at the University of Edinburgh for 1.5 years. Then again came back to Austria and decided that's actually a very nice country to live in, and decided if possible, I'd like to stay for at least quite a while. So I tried to get funding for my own projects, and I became a project group leader, a research group leader at the TU Wien. I had quite a few FWF projects that I got for myself. At the same time, I was embedded actually in a very large division, and I was involved in industry collaborations with pharma companies. Some of them were mentioned already in Tamara's introduction. I did some research stays in France, and at the TU Wien, I supervised students. I was teaching lectures and lab courses, and also I finally got a habilitation in biochemistry. But at that time, I already had the feeling, I had progressed through all of these steps, but I already had the feeling, actually, I might not want to stay in research. I thought, actually, science is really nice, but it does not need to be my own research. So I already started looking for other positions, and I looked in industry, I looked in research administration, because when I was still in research, I was also in the editorial board of a few scientific journals. I was editing papers or assigning reviewers to papers. I was involved in reshaping of our institute at the TU Wien. So I was involved in quite a few other processes that I found very interesting. So I decided, why not do that for a living, and sort of shape processes, shape how an institution works. So in 2015, I joined the ISTA, the Institute of Science and Technology Austria, which is at the outskirts of Vienna. We are a very young institute. ISTA was only founded, or the campus opened in 2009. We have only PhD students, from PhD students upwards, so we don't have undergrad students. And my first position here was faculty recruiting and evaluation. So I was hired to coordinate faculty recruiting processes in life sciences and chemistry, because we are growing very fast. We grow by we add several groups per year. So this is actually a big task to sort of coordinate all these recruiting processes. And also we have a lot of evaluations to ensure that we work on an internationally high level and on a benchmark ourselves to international institutions. After a while doing that, as a side topic, I became the ethics officer. And this is sort of has become more and more time consuming for me. And at some point, I switched to being full-time ethics officer. And this is what I'm still doing now. And so what is that actually? What's an ethics officer doing? And an ethics officer, or I as an ethics officer, coordinate everything on campus that is related to responsible research. So for me, there are these two topics. One is research integrity or good scientific practice, which is how you do your research. It's about the quality of your research. And I put some keywords here. It's the standards of good scientific practice, how you perform the research, fair review, authorship, having a good research environment, and of course preventing and also investigating, if applicable, research misconduct allegations such as the falsification, fabrication, plagiarism, and so on. Research ethics, and this is what I spent actually most of my time with, is for me the content. And here are the topics listed, and here we stick to what the EU defines for EU projects as ethics. So this is what you do in your research. If you have human participants, human samples and data, and animals, for all of these topics, there are a lot of rules, and there's a lot of legislation, a lot of compliance, and I support our scientists with making sure that they fulfill all of these requirements and that they stick to the requirements that the funding agencies impose on us, and also the legislation does. So that's ethics for me. So what do I do all day long? There are three main chapters. The first, that is on this slide here, is raising awareness and providing information. I teach workshops that are mandatory for all of our scientists. So I teach our PhD students, I teach our postdocs, I talk to our faculty. I also occasionally give external workshops. I organize discussion sessions on different topics such as medical genomics or artificial intelligence. I make sure that all of this information is also available online. I moderate reflection sessions for teams that work on a specific topic. I'm also an ombudsperson, so I'm go-to person for scientists, so they can come to me for confidential advice. If any allegations are brought forward, we have solid procedures to look into that. I help with grant applications and other type of contracts. So that's being the nice person. But I also am the person that sometimes raises a finger and says, well, you need to be more careful. So I do a lot of monitoring. I review projects. I review our grant applications to make sure that the scientists really, nothing sort of slips through like our attention, and we overlook some requirements. A lot of evaluation and also reporting. And finally, I'm the policy advisor. So we need to have rules and guidelines. We need to have policies, flow charts. So I'm the one who's responsible to get all of that and to get it approved by the management in the end. And for that, I also participate in international and national networks, and also the Austrian Agency for Research Integrity is an important national network for us. So these are my tasks. What motivates me in my job? It never gets boring. We are a very international working environment. We have English as working language, and we are rapidly growing. So routine is the exception. And this can be tough, but it's also really enjoyable. Because, there's no year is the same as the other, because we grow in such a fast pace. I enjoy the broad spectrum of tasks. As I just told you, policy advising, a lot of process management. I learned a lot of reviewing, but also I enjoy the breadth of scientific topics. And this is what's a relevant message for me. When I did research, I did my topic, and there you enjoy getting in more and more detail. But what I need to do now, in the morning, I might talk about embryonic stem cells, and in the afternoon, I might talk about artificial intelligence and the use of large databases of facial images for some computer science project. And in between, I might talk about quantum physics or whatever just comes along, collecting plants, collecting resources from the wild. So it's really broad. And I like this generalistic view, because our scientists, they are at the forefront of research. So you're involved, you hear about things that others do, and actually that have already achieved, because they have already results. You all know how tough it can be to arrive at your results. And so I'm in touch with that, but I sort of advise them from a different angle. Which skills are useful for this job? So I thought about that a bit. I think I'm very curious, maybe, and I'm curious about different sectors. So when I did my research on my enzymes and gene regulation, that was very nice, and I enjoyed it a lot. But I like to be even more generalistic, scientifically, as I just said, but also it's really interesting to learn more about risk assessment tools and how to run a project in a very professional way. As a PhD student, you're responsible for your project. But when I talk about a project that involves the legal affairs and scientific service units and a lot of other divisions, it's a different type of project management. It's an interesting skill to learn more about that. Whistleblowing systems, whistleblower protection, and so on. I need to know also what's shown here on the side, a lot about other topics. So ethics and integrity, sort of touches on aspects like diversity and inclusion. It touches on open science. It touches on outreach, because you also want to transport that you do responsible research and so on. But all of that for me is paired with a real understanding of the research processes, because I have my own experiences. I've been through the ranks, if you wish. So, and this helps to really relate to the everyday life of a researcher. But I learned a lot about research in other disciplines, because how mathematicians or computer scientists think is very different from how we life scientists, and especially I was an experimentalist, do the job. Right. Then I thought a bit, which soft skills do I think are useful for my job? I need a lot of communication skills. On one hand, it's a teaching and moderation, and I need to handle conflict situations. I need to negotiate with lawyers, with the management. It's not easy and challenging, and I like that. I need to network a lot within the institute and beyond. It's really a cross-cutting topic. And also, I need to have a quite independent working style. Ethics is usually a topic that's handled by very few persons at an institution. And thus, you need to be very self-organized and prioritized, because you need to push the topic yourself. So you need to push your own topic, and that's, it gives you a lot of freedom, but also a lot of responsibility, I feel. So at other institutions, people like me are called data management officer or research integrity officer or the unit head for quality management. So these are comparable or partially comparable job profiles. So finally, I have two slides with some thoughts on what are my tips if you consider leaving research or sort of going away from this research path at a certain point, because it took me quite a few years to decide that I'm really sure I really want to leave research. So first, don't wait too long. I waited very long, as you saw in the beginning. I even did my habilitation, and I was lucky to get this position that I had here in the beginning. My advice would be to actually leave earlier. I kind of forgot it on the way because I did like my research topic. And at some point, it occurred to me again, didn't I want to do something else? So, and then if you want to leave research, get something on your CV that connects to whatever you want to do. If you want to go to industry, think about good manufacturing practice. If you, in my case, want to go to research administration, think about getting some courses, workshops, trainings about, for example, project management, or if you're interested in like financial aspects, something along those lines. Or you can also just show don't forget to show those skills on your CV if you have them. If you coordinated a project, write it explicitly. If you did any administrative tasks on the side, like working for an association at the UGMBT or ILSA, something like that, list it specifically. It is a skill. It shows that you can look beyond your research. List any internships or any other short-term work experiences that you had. So I've been at the Institute for a while, so I have seen quite a lot of applications also for administrative jobs here. So you need to have something, my advice is to have something that sets you apart from a typical research CV. So study, PhD, postdoc maybe, what else? And make sure that you explain why you want to leave research and why you are interested in this position. You don't need to sell that this is like this particular position that you're applying for is your dream job ever, but there must be a good reason why you want to leave research other than I don't have any funding anymore, because usually there will be other applications that can do better than that, and this doesn't give you a good chance to get the job that you might want. And finally, consider that the first step might be the most difficult one. I have colleagues, and I think that told me, and I think it's a good idea. That's why I'm mentioning it. That told me, I first applied for some maternity or paternity replacement or some time-limited contract because this got me the job experience to sort of polish up my CV and then get a permanent job. Or be flexible with the tasks for your first job. There's the grant office. Every university or every institution has a grant office. There's communications and outreach. different types of evaluation jobs, student affairs, like managing the student life cycle, coordination of large projects. So all of that can be quite interesting to get you some skills and maybe also give you some idea what you might want to do as a next step. And the final advice or thought from my side is, don't worry, because I do believe that, I firmly believe that switching jobs once you have left research is actually potentially easier and faster than in research. If you don't like it, you will leave, you will find another again, because it's not like in research where you need to work for a few years to finish the project, to get the paper, which is actually necessary to give you the next good job. It's a bit more flexible, I feel, in other sectors. And I think that's, for me, for how I think, this is an advantage, because it feels less restricted, I would say. So this was a quick rundown of what I have done and what my thoughts on that would be. So I think that's at the end of my slideshow, and I think I'll stop sharing the screen.
Thank you very much, Verena. So I would like to open the discussion. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask whatever you want. This is the purpose of such events. Write them in the chat, or just say them, ask them. I will read them also from the chat, so feel free to ask. So we have one question in the chat. It's from Elena. Thank you for the nice overview on the job profile on an ethics officer. How problematic do you think is the Kettenvertragsregel in the research administration? Or does it play a big, or does it not play a big role? So what's your opinion on that?
I suppose you mean the Kettenvertragsregel, really, if you work in research administration, or do you mean from the point of view of a research administrator? So for research administration, if you really work in research administration, usually the contracts are unlimited. So we offer usually unlimited contracts. The Kettenvertrag.
I think for the researchers.
So at least, I mean, this is how I know it here. Unless you're employed on a project, if that's EU funded, that has a special job for someone, then it would be a time limited contract. But other than that, it's usually unlimited contracts. So in that sense, it's not such a problematic topic. I think this is more a topic that applies to the researchers that don't have a permanent position and need to fund themselves for project after project.
Yeah, I think just out of the ethical view, how ethical is this way of working? I think that was also part of the question. If you can only just work there for 3 years, and then, that's it. What's the opinion of an ethics officer on that?
In administration, I really have not come across this as a big problem, because the time-limited contracts are usually, I think, because the perspective is a different one. If you take up a time-limited contract, the employer usually really can already tell you if this is for sure time-limited, or if there might be a chance that you can sort of stay. So it's a bit different, I think, because I think it's really not such a problem, because there's an institution has a certain set of administrative positions, and this institution will strive to fill that with people that have an unlimited contract. It's really different from the research business, where you have the permanent positions, and then you have this large crowd of people that need to fund themselves from project to project to project. This really does not exist in that way in administration, for example. So that feels, I think, it's a relief to sort of not be confronted with that issue. Because, of course, I was also one of those for a while that was funded by a project. I then got an unlimited contract at the TU Wien, which I decided to leave still, but it's not. It's a very stressful situation, this time limited contract. And I think it's from the integrity point of view, I think it's not good for the research system because it puts a lot of pressure on the scientists to perform. And this does not give you the relaxed freedom that you should have to do good research. But that's, away from my position towards the topics that I handle.
Yeah, that's, I think, a big topic. So, but there is another question. So, do bigger institutes or universities have ethics departments, like all of them, or is it a unique thing from ISTA? And how big is that department in your institute?
So it's not unique. We are, here at ISTA, it's actually quite small because I do the main job and I do that in collaboration with colleagues in grant office, for example, or in the scientific service unit. So at ISTA, it's actually one or two people who do the main bulk of the job here. But most institutions, so let's now talk first about other countries, have a small team that handles that. So from what I know from colleagues in Europe, it's usually a team of 2 to 4 people that handles, either they call it responsible research or research quality management or research integrity office. So it's usually a small team that does cross-cutting topics and sort of sets up the overall procedures. In Austria, it's not so common yet. But for example, the TU Wien has set up also a responsible or an ethics office. So they also now have a small team that is starting to set it up. So it's becoming also more frequent and also more common in Austria, actually, that universities become more structured with respect to handling these topics.
Really good. So there are a few positions also. You also mentioned like other names for that same way of career path. So that's a good hint.
It's research integrity office. That's the international term in some countries and also in the US. I think what many institutions are now setting up is units or offices, at least, that help with the data management. It's the data protection regulation. If you have large data, the medical university, for example, they have these large biobanks. So they have very interesting people that are very knowledgeable on, IT and scientific aspects of, for example, medical images. But on the other hand, they need to know quite a lot about the legislation because of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. So, that's a subtopic of research of integrity and ethics to handle that. And I think this data stewards, for example, is a subtopic of that now more and more institutions are setting up. So that was one example that I mentioned. And it's interesting to talk to those people because they are real experts on IT and legal stuff. And they really know, in a way that the researchers need to understand what they're talking about. It's really nice to listen to them.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, I think also this topic of data safety is getting more and more important. So I have a question as well. So what are the difficulties of working in an interdisciplinary institute? As you said, you sometimes also have to deal also with physics, for example.
Yeah. But the experimentalists are for me easier to. They're closer to what I did than the theorists. So the challenges are that you need to, for example, set up workshops, or you need to teach students from all disciplines. And there will always be some, like if you have theoretical mathematics, like pure mathematics, well, there is no ethics topic in there. And then you get this feedback from some of them, I don't want to listen to that, it doesn't apply to me. And also some group leaders might think along those lines. So you permanently need to reevaluate where you're standing, what's the minimum level of knowledge that you need to transport to all of them. And you need to understand how they tick. And also, so on one hand, you need to sort of still find a way to sort of explain to them why you and the institute think it's still relevant, that they listen to what they need to listen to. And on the other hand, you also need to know enough about topics like artificial intelligence and machine learning to see where the ethics topics are. Because I need to screen or monitor or review our grant applications, our PhD projects. And the way we do that, of course, is we have a so-called self-assessment. So I have a set of questions, and the researchers need to answer the questions about their project. But then I will take their answers and compare that to what they have written in the grant application or in the project. So it starts with a self-assessment, but still I need to understand some of that, also to provide advice. And that's the challenge. It's very nice because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how computer science works, how mathematics works. From the, when I say works, I mean from how the research environment ticks. What's relevant for them? What's their working mode? How do they interact? What's relevant for them? It's quite different from experimentalists. And I just give one example. So in the workshops, and I also learned that the scientists don't know that about the other fields. So we regularly in my workshops have as an example a discussion about authorship. And there are many fields that have alphabetical authorship, or just one or two authors. So those people are always then very surprised to hear how complex authorship is in the life sciences, with this first author, last author, equal first author, contributing author, and so on. And by now I know all of these facets of that, and I enjoy it again, over and over again, when the researchers have these revelations, when they talk to their colleagues during my workshops.
Sounds really interesting. And also, it's also nice to work in an interdisciplinary institute where you can really interact with each other. So my last question, and this is something I ask like every speaker, is if you could give your younger self one advice, like just one, what would it be?
I should. It would not have brought me to ISTA but my advice would have been after my postdoc in Edinburgh. My advice would have been apply for an industry position. I didn't apply because I was so focused on continuing what I had sort of started to discover during my postdoc. My advice would be open up your mind and become more open-minded, actually. Apply for an industry position. I think that would be it, although it might sound, it's not,
Thank you very much. Yeah. So to stay broad, like to see also other perspectives.
Yeah, I really forgot it. I mean, this is maybe an advice. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I was a bit narrow-minded at that point, but maybe it's a useful advice for some of the younger people that are listening.
Thank you for your advice.